just a reminder to everyone that we are in a BC provincial park and we should not be collecting anything from the park, any kind of rocks, plants, anything from the park, but especially after learning about medicinal and food purposes from different plants, we just want to remind you that we do not collect in the park and that you should always make sure that it's a safe thing to do, that someone has told you exactly what it is.
Okay. So like I was saying in the video earlier, that consult with your elders, consult with your parents, do the research, don't just rush out and start harvesting and gathering any of the plants that I talked about today. You need to be very familiar with them, and that we need to be extra careful with the foods, the plants that I talked about, because some could be dangerous for you. And they could also have allergic reactions to them, that you don't want to take those chances unless you're very familiar and that you're close to family.
Cook's Jam.
Cook's Jam. Quiet Tip and Squest, Bernice Jensen. Hello everyone, my name is Bernice Jensen. I work at the Kamloops Aboriginal Friendship Society as a cultural education coordinator. I also work with School District 73, and I do presentations from September to June with the kindergarten to grade 12. So today I would like to thank the Adams River Salmon Society for inviting me today to do a talk on plants and medicinal medicines. And so today I'm going to talk about the plants. So First Nations people have been here in the Secwepemcúlecw for thousands and thousands of years. And in that time, they had to learn how to live off the land. And they had to learn what plants to eat, what plants not to eat, when to harvest them, and when to gather them. And so typically a long time ago, the women and the children were the ones that did the harvesting and gathering. The boys and the girls would help their mothers, and the aunts and the cousins. And so everything were in seasonal rounds. And so during the winter time, there were no plants to pick at that time. That was the time that they would be inside the pit houses, and they would do the crafts that they needed to do. They would get the foods that they had harvested from the previous fall, spring, and summer, and they would go and pick those and use them for the winter months. During the springtime, one of the first plants that would come out in abundance was the arrowleaf, split leaf balsam root, so aka the sunflower. The sunflower was one of the first plants that would come up, and what the sunflower was good for was it would it was kind of like a plant that could be multi-purpose. They would dig it up in March and April and early May. They could dig the roots out, and the roots would be about this long, and you would pick it while the root was still fresh, and you could eat it. This spring, my son Tyler Jensen and I went out and we harvested the balsam root, and we picked it at the perfect time because the root was very, very soft, and we ate it raw. And so when we ate it, it was very mild tasting. So you could, like I said, steam it, boil it, roast it, and the First Nations people would eat the plants. And because the winter time they didn't have any fresh fruits or vegetables like we have today, they needed to slowly introduce the plants to their diet once again. And so if they ate too much fresh fruits and vegetables right away in the springtime, they would get their stomachs would get very upset. So they had to slowly introduce the plants again. And so an elder told me about that. Now with the arrowleaf balsam root, they could eat the whole plant. You could dig up the roots in the early spring. You could eat the young leaves that sprout up, and later on, You could eat the, you could also eat the flower heads. And so you would use the porter pestle and mortar, and you can crush the flower heads and make a type of flour out of that as well. Also, the leaves in the spring, summer, and fall, while they're still out there, you could harvest those, and let's say you had a problem with your skin and you got poison ivy, you could boil it and you could put it on your poison ivy. So any kind of skin irritations as well. So from there, we have what they call the stinging nettle. Now, the stinging nettle was a plant that you could eat early in the springtime while the plants and the new shoots are still young. If you wait till they're older, they get the nettle that they talk about that will sting your skin, and it kind of leaves a bit of a, not a burn, but a really prickly feeling on your skin. So you wouldn't eat it at that time, but you could eat it earlier on. What they also did was they could make a tea from it. So the tea was good for inflammation. It was good for helping with your blood pressure, with a pain reliever, and also to reduce the risk of infection as well. So that's the stinging nettle. The other thing that stinging nettle was good for was it was also used, you could use it to make a type of fiber for a rope. I don't have a picture of that one or a plant of that but that's stinging nettle. We have devil's club. Now with devil's club, it was multi-purpose as well. You could make a powder from it, you could make a tea from it, and then you could also make a salve from it. So one of my plants that I have here for the devil's club is this one right here. So this is a devil's club, and it has multi-purposes as well. The devil's club was used as when you were going to go and harvest birch, the sap from the birch bark, the birch tree, paper birch, they would use the devil's club. They would clean out the centerpiece of that and use it to use it as kind of like a tap, and so they could put it into the tree and harvest the paper birch fluid from it, and it was a spring tonic. This here is a devil's club here with olive oil. Now with the oils that they have today, we use the olive oil or the mostly I know most of the people that do medicines do the olive oil, but a long time ago they would have used bear grease. So bears are the animal that had the most fat on its body, so they would harvest the bear grease and they would mix their medicines in that. So one of the things about devil's club is it was good for using it as a kind of like a type of to harvest the fluids from the trees. It also was good for wounds, fever, stomach problems, coughs, and colds. And so those are the uses of some of the devil's club. The black spruce, they would harvest the pitch, and the pitch was good for a type of gum that they would use. And also, if you ended up with a cut, they would put pitch on the cut and you could close in the wound. The other thing with the pitch is if you were using, this here is a birch bark basket. If you were going to be using the baskets to cook with, they have been sewn together with cedar root. And so to close in those punctures on the birch bark, what they would have to do is they would use pitch and they would close them in so that it could hold the water. And this is this would be able to hold the water in, and they would put water in there, and with heat transfer they would heat these small rocks up that were like the river rocks. They were very polished and smooth, and they could heat up the rocks, put their foods into the baskets, and they could cook the food in the baskets. This here is a cedar root basket. It comes from the cedar tree, and they're from the roots as well. But because they're roots, and because they came from the trees, they can hold the water in because they're all very, very finely woven. You could do that with these cedar root baskets as well, and you can use them to cook with. So that's a little bit about the birch bark. They are the black spruce. They could use it for, the spruce was used for the roots to make to weave the baskets as well. They would also use it for some of the boughs to lie on as well, and they would use some of the powder resin to help with promote healing as well. Lodgepole pine. So the lodgepole pine is right here. So with the lodgepole pine, they use the wood for fishing spears, teepee poles, spring lodge poles. The inner bark was important, that you would harvest it in May and June, cambrium, and they would eat it when the sap was running. From the bark as well, you can harvest it, and you can make a type of tea that was good for colds, coughs, and for your immune system. So that's the lodgepole pine. Also, when you look at the pine, they're at the higher elevation. So the base of the tree is very small. So it grows very tall, but it's very small. And so they would use those for the dip nets. They would also use them for the gill nets. And like I said, again, the summer lodging for the poles, kind of like the teepee poles. Some of the berries that came out earlier in the spring, so we would have different seasons throughout the spring, summer, and fall. They would harvest the roots first. So some of the important roots that they were harvesting was the balsam root. Then they would have what they call the spring beauty. And the spring beauty, I'm just trying to look for my plant there. The spring beauty is for wild potatoes. So here is a bag of wild potatoes that I harvested, and they're not that big, but the women and the children would do crop rotation. They wouldn't go into the same location over and over and pick everything. They would make sure that they left plants there for the next year and maybe go to a different location the following year. And they would always make sure that there was enough plants left so that they would be able to replenish themselves. So that's the spring beauty. Also in the springtime, we also get what they call bitter root. This is bitter root. Bitter root is a trading plant, and it's good for it's good to eat, and they also say that it's good for certain types of stomach ailments. One of the things about the bitter root is that it's one of the 4 food chiefs that they talk about. This here, when you pick it, it comes from a plant that's only this big. This is the flower. It's a very beautiful pink flower. You pick it before it flowers, so around May, the end of April, May. And you have to harvest it before it flowers, so you would pick the roots then. With this, I've had this for a few years. You could make a meal with this bitter root, and you could put some huckleberries or Saskatoon berries in it, and it's a nice meal with that. I just took a bite of one, and it's got a little bit of a bitter taste to it. So that's the bitter root. So there's other types of roots that you would harvest and gather, but those are kind of some of the main ones. We have the Labrador plant here. It's good for relaxation, colds, coughs. You would boil it and steep the leaves in the water for about 10 minutes, and then you can drink it. So it's really good. It also is good, the leaves are good to repel mosquitoes and insects as well. So I like to drink this tea at home, and it's a very mild tasting tea. What I like about the traditional teas is that they're organic. There's no additives or preservatives. There's no chemicals that are added to these traditional teas. So I really like, if I'm going to drink a tea, I like to drink organic teas that come from the land. Cattail. So we have different elevations. We have different kind of environments. We have the pond life. We have the low valley. We have mid, and we have the higher elevations. And so with the cattail, they're found in the ponds. So this is the bulrush. The top part here is the cattail. The cattail is really, really important because for the mothers that were having children, these were used. They would make a little type of underwear, and they would use it for the diapers. So there was no any kind of like garbage that was put on the land. Everything was biodegradable, and so including the baby diapers could be just used and thrown out again, and then it would be biodegradable. So with this one here, the bulrush, the cattail, so the cattail is the top part, but the bulrush is the plant. It's actually, you could use these to make different types of mats. This here is a cattail basket. So this is a bulrush mat basket. You can also make the bulrush mats, and what they use these ones for is they, if it was a mat, they would put all the berries on there so they could sun dry the berries for the coming winter time. So that's the bulrush. Also, you could eat the small shoots on the plants. The small shoots could be eaten as well. They use the bulrush, these mats for insulating the pit houses. They used it for in the dugout canoes so they didn't chafe their knees. They used it to sun dry the berries. With this cattail, the top part, it's got a bunch of seeds here, and the seeds you can use the pestle and mortar, and you can pound it, and you can actually make a type of flour as well. So that one had multi-purposes as well. You can eat it, you can use the leaves, you can make a flour, baby diapers, feminine products, insulation as well. So that's the bulrush. Yarrow. Yarrow is a type of plant that grows here locally. You probably see it here in the park. This is what yarrow looks like. Now, the shoots come up about this high. There's they look like little fern-like leaves. And the yarrow is really good because they help discourage mosquitoes and insects. You can pull the root out, and there's a little purpley colored part of the root that if you have a toothache, and a long time ago they didn't have dentists, so if they had tooth pain, they could bite onto the yarrow, and it helps as a pain reliever. And I tried that, and it actually really works. So you can bite into that purple part of the root, and so I did that, and I noticed that my mouth got a little bit numb. You can use it as well to you can use it also for stings and for sores and burns, so you can kind of make a little bit of like a poultice, and you can put it on those parts as well. So I'm going really quickly as fast as I can so that we can cover as much as we can as well. Supalelli is a really good one. Just harvested a bunch of supalelli and or what they call soapberry, and it's really good for cleansing the mouth, for our mouths. It's good for our digestion. It cleanses the blood. It's eaten fresh, or you can dry it. Today, First Nations people gather it and they'll can it, as well as you can freeze it. But a long time ago, once again, they would use the bulrush mats or the tule mats, and they would dry them. and it was a good trading item as well. So this is the Supaleli. Now, the medicines, you can make a tea from it also. So one of the things that I was told about the Supaleli also, some of the medicinal purposes, is that, here's a picture of it right here, is that it's good for the stomach, helps with high blood pressure. It's good for, you can boil the leaves and the branches and the berries even, and it helps with acne, boils, and even gallstones. So that's the Supaleli, Husham they call it, and that had many good purposes as well. Common juniper, we have Rocky Mountain juniper is the higher tree that goes several, I'd say about 15 feet or higher, and the common juniper is the low bush. And so these ones here, the juniper was also really important. They would use it as a deodorizer, and it would cleanse. They would cleanse the air, and so especially in the pit homes, they would want to cleanse the air, especially if someone was sick, they would want to cleanse it. Right now we're dealing with COVID-19, and people are burning. They can either boil it and steam it and use it as a diffuser. They would also burn the juniper as well, and use that as a type of kind of like a smudge as well to deodorize and cleanse the air. You can also boil it and make a tea that's good for colds and for heart troubles and also kidney trouble as well. So that is the juniper. And they seldomly really ate the berries as well. So we have the sage. Now the sage is what we use for smudging. It also is, unfortunately I don't have any sage here, but it's the common sage that grows in the Kamloops areas and other surrounding areas as well. It's used for smudging. If you burn the sage is good for repelling mosquitoes and insects as well. You can make a type of tea, which I've tried, and it's very strong, which is for medicinal purposes. Also, you use the wood for smoking hides and for firewood. They also used it for you could rub the leaves and sniff it, and it was good for helping to get away, to help get rid of headaches. And you could make the teas, and it was good for soaking your feet, for sore feet, and also for washing your eye for eye infections. So that, and then we also use it as one of our medicines. So the bitter root again is this one, and so we have this one is the bitter root. This is the flower for it, trading item. The roots were dug, and it's also good. So I mentioned some of the medicinal purposes of the bitter root, but also that it was good for the mothers after they had their children to help increase milk flow. It purifies the blood, and it helps with skin problems as well. So that is the bitter root, and it also is good. It's just a food as well, so you would just eat it. The Oregon grape is here. We have the tall Oregon grape. Now this is the leaves here that you can see. I don't have the berries for them, but you could dig the roots. The roots were good for coloring things, like you could color porcupine quills, and it would give it a yellow color to it. They ate the berries, and they could dry them as well. They would use the bark and the wood as a tonic that you could boil and drink, and it helped with purifying the blood. They also used it for a tea that helped with the liver and the kidneys also. So many good uses of the Oregon grape. Kinnicknick. So kinnicknick is a low-bearing plant. It likes to be probably in this park. It likes to be in the sand. It grows near the trees, likes to be along the river banks. Looks a lot like this. So the kinnicknick has a lot of medicinal purposes. It's good for the kidney, good for the bladder. It's if you drink it, a lot of it turns your urine a light green. So you know you're getting the medicines if you see that your urine is starting to turn green. They use it as a tonic. It's or a healthy tea as well, and it helps with stomach disorders or if you have a sore throat. So that's kinnicknick as well. Also, they would have used it traditionally as a traditional tobacco as well. Kinnicknick. Cottonwood. Now I have a cottonwood salve here, and this is good for pain reliever. So you would harvest the cottonwood bud in early March when the buds are just coming out for the leaves and they actually haven't opened up. They're just the buds of the cottonwood. You harvest those, and what we do right now is we put it in an oil, which is the extra virgin olive oil, and they will saturate in there. They take out the oil, and then from there they can mix it with a type of beeswax, and then you can have a salve. And this salve is good for pain reliever. If you have some aches and pains, it helps out with that. You can also use it for a type of glue, the resin from the cotton bud. When you're picking, Tyler and I went out picking cottonwood bud this year, and our fingers, when we were picking it, it just turns really resiny and sticky. And so the fluff, when the fluff is starting to come off the tree, they would harvest that as well, and they could make a type of kind of like stuff it for a pillow. They use the ash from the wood for a type of laundry soap. They could use the wood from the cottonwood tree. The dry kind of rotten wood is used for smoking hides. The tea is good to make as well, which has some medicinal purposes for colds and coughs. And then also the buds is good for pain relievers and sore aches and pains in the body. Also the cottonwood was for dugout canoes. So one of the multi-purposes for these plants as well. The cedar is right here. Now some people say that you can use this as a tea, but I'm told that in this area, in this location, we don't use this type of cedar to make a tea to drink, but it still had a lot of good uses. This spring I went out with a group of people and we harvested the cedar roots, and the cedar roots are used to make the cedar root baskets. The cedar roots are good for sewing the birch bark baskets together. So multi-purpose as well. The wood was used for making dip net hoops, for dip netting for fishing. They were also good for making the boughs were used for making temporary shelters. The bark was used for good for making cedar bark baskets, which I've made before. And the boughs, like I said, for some of the boughs, if you make a tea, you have to know which tea to use, and unfortunately I don't know which tea. I just know that in this territory we don't drink the tea, but if you find out where to drink which cedar it is, you can use it as a tea, and it has medicinal purposes also. We have the prickly rose, wild rose, prickling rose. And so with the wild rose, we can drink it as a tea, and it's good for colds, anti-inflammatory, scurvy, and it's good for heart toning. So a lot of good purpose for the prickling rose. You can eat the little leaves off of them, the little petals, which are I've used to chew on it as a kid. If you chew on the leaves, it's good as a insect. It helps with pain relieving and swelling. Also, the petals are good for teas, and there's another tea for that one as well. The roots were scraped and soaked and made into an ointment for eyesores as well. The rose hip. These are bags of the rose hip here. This is stuff that I collected last year. Now with the rose hip, you can actually eat the rose hip as well. It boosts the immune system, but there's a story about the rose hip that our elders talked about. And with the rose hip, inside are seeds. And what they said is you can eat the fleshy part of the rose hip, but do not eat the seeds. If you eat the seeds, you will get what they call a insusu poops, which means a itchy bum. So I was told that, and as I was doing research, I found out that if you Google it, they after contact, someone had learnt about the rose hips as well, and they made an itching powder from it. So, an insusu poops. But you can make a tea from it as well. You can eat it. One of these little rose hip buds have the same amount of vitamin C as a regular sized orange as well. So that's a lot of vitamin C in one of these rose hips. And that is also a tea that you can use, that you can make for yourself, and it has medicinal purposes also. The red willow, it grows around in this area. You can tell the plant likes to be near the water and the river. If you look at it, it has the red shoots that come up, little branches. And unfortunately, I don't have the red willow, but you can tell that it's a red willow because it has the red bark on it. That one was really good because the wood was used for sweat lodges because it was so flexible. The bark was used for pain reliever, so you could make a type of tea. After contact with the newcomers, First Nations people introduced the pain reliever that we use in aspirins today. So it helps with menstrual cramps, it helps with back pain, it helps, it fights acne as well. So you can make a tea and drink that. So when you're a young teenager and you're breaking out, you can use it to make tea and have it to help get rid of acne as well. You can chew the bark as well, and you can still get that pain reliever effect as well. So a lot of good uses of the red willow. So some of the other plants that we're going to talk about is, we talked about the cedar. This is the birch bark. Now with the birch bark, we're using 3 types of plants here. We're using the cedar root, we use the birch bark from the tree, and inside here is a hoop that comes from the Saskatoon bush. So 3 different plants to make one basket. This here comes from the ponderosa pine. They use the pine to make a yellow, the pollen was used to make a yellow dye. You can burn the wood, and it's actually kind of like a smokeless wood as well. You also use the wood to smoke hides, but it has to be rotten wood. A friend of mine, she lives in Little Shuswap, and her name is Jody, and she was telling me, she's a really good friend of mine and a former student that I used to see at Chase Secondary, but she told me she scraped a hide, she tanned it, and she was in the midst of smoking it, and she didn't use the rotten or really dry wood, and then when she was smoking her hide, the wood smokes and it has a bit of pitch, and so it will darken the hide. And so she said it was a really important lesson that she learned. This here is from the pine tree. So also they would collect the pine needles and they could make baskets from it also. So a lot of good uses for a lot of these plants. They also used the cedar, which we talked about. This is a cedar mat. that they could use for having in the pit houses to lie on as their bedding as well, so that they were, when they put boughs down, put the mats down, they could put their furs on it and it wouldn't get their bedding dirty. So those are cedar mats. We also, this is one from my friend Jody. They went out and harvested the cedar inner bark, and then you could make a type of rope from it. This also, so that's the type of rope that they would use. Then also we have, you can split the cedar bark and you can make a type of tools from it. This one is a fishing needle that they would use. I can't remember the terminology that they used for that one, but that was like a needle to do up your nets and hoops. This here is dog bane, or what we call Indian hemp. It's harvested in the late autumn, probably around October-ish. It's a green plant to begin with, grows near lakes and rivers, and as well I found that it grows near farmers' fields, because the farmers are irrigating their fields now, and they're getting that constant water which these plants like, and you can harvest it from there. So right where I live, I just go out and harvest these plants. So they were used to make a type of twine that was good for fishing nets, animal traps, weaving baskets, flat bags, and making rope. So this here again is a type of the dog bane, and when you're doing that, you can harvest these. These are the kind of the plants, and so from the plants you take off the outer bark and you can actually twine it. And so when you clean it and do all this work to it, you can make a type of rope from it as well. So that one is the dog bane. Lichen was really important. It was kind of your emergency food. It grows on all these trees around here on the branches, and there's a legend that goes with it about coyote, and so I really like that legend. It's the spider, it's coyote and spider woman, and so it talks about how the lichen came to be, and it's coyote hair. So here it was an emergency food that you could mix with some bear grease or a little bit of other plants, and then you could eat it. But you had to boil it for a long time and clean the water and boil it again, because it was very strong tasting. This is the common leaf plantain, also called frog leaf. It's a natural band-aid, antiseptic. I remember as a little girl, I got stung by a bee, and my grandmother, Mary Abel, she sprung up, grabbed the plantain that grows around in this area as well, likes to be in the grass along the riverbanks, and then she chewed on it and had me put it the pulpous stuff onto my arm to help with the swelling. So it helps with cuts and also for bee stings. Raspberry, we have the wild raspberry here. So these are the dry ones. So it helps with inducing labor during pregnancy. It helps with nausea, leg cramps. While pregnant, it reduces the cramps. Also, it's just a good tea all in general. So it helps with the immune system, protects the heart, and it also helps with colds and coughs. So a lot of good purposes of the raspberry. If you go to the stores, I would suggest going to the health food stores and getting raspberry there, or going out and harvesting your own. But make sure you go with the elder. I always say make sure that you know what you're picking. Here is strawberries, and we know that we'd probably have strawberries in this area as well, in the sandy areas, in the tree lines by the river. They grow in all different elevations. They help with fevers. They're high in vitamin C. They have a laxative. It's good for that as well. It's a good tonic. Helps with mouth problems. It lowers the blood pressure. So a lot of really good uses for the raspberry as well. So this here, I'm gonna look, this one we see occasionally. It's called sumac, and it grows around in dry areas. It has these little berries here. I went to a workshop with iSpark, and I can't remember the whole acronym for the name for that, but it's for Honor Your Health. And they helped us make a type of lemonade from these berries. So what you're doing with these berries, you put it in cold water and you rub it, and you have like a cheesecloth, and you keep working on these berries, and then you drink the fluid from the berries, and it kind of is like a traditional lemonade from the sumac. I wouldn't suggest going out and picking the sumac in crowded areas like in towns or in cities or someone's yard, because you don't know what kind of chemicals could be sprayed in the area. If you're going to harvest these plants and stuff, go to areas where there's not a lot of people that are going onto the land, because you don't know if they've had chemicals added to that. Now here we have talked about almost all of these. This is a chokecherry. They collect the berries. Now they say that with the berries that there's cyanide, and the cyanide is only in the seed. So just like apples will have cyanide in the seed. Don't eat the seed. But as a little girl, I used to eat the chokecherries, and you can still eat those as well. Better to have them cooked though, and they would store the chokecherries as well. We got there's an abundance of chokecherries here as well, and you use the bark. But they use the bark when they're making the cedar, and this is a cherry bark, chokecherry bark that they can harvest the bark from, and it gives it these different colors in the baskets. I think, let's see, dandelion. So dandelion is a super plant. The dandelion, you can eat almost all the parts of the dandelion plant. I don't think I have anything on the dandelion for photos. Nope. But with the dandelion, you can you can use the roots and make a type of tea. Some people grind it up, make a type of coffee. You can actually eat the leaves while the leaves are young, and you can make a type of salad. So I had a friend that went to Europe, and in Europe they sell dandelion salads there. You can use the flower heads, and for some people, when I was a young girl, I would see people on the roadside picking dandelion, and they could make a type of wine from it as well. So you can make a tea as well, and with the tea you use the dry roots, leaves, and even the flower, and so you can make another organic tea. Horsetail grows near the kind of like ponds and areas like that. So here, this is a horsetail. They come in segments that can be pulled apart, and as a young girl I used to like pulling them apart. These are good for polishing wood. They're good for the women doing their nails, to polish their nails. They also are good for smoothing things. You can make a medicine from it. So I have one that's a horsetail as well, which is right here. We are horsetail. So this is horsetail and devil's club, and it's helps for a pain reliever as well. With the horsetail, I was told you can hear a little. It's hollow in the center. With the women with the children that were sick, they could administer medicine through these little straws. So with the babies, they would have to get the medicine, and then they could put it into the baby's mouth so that they could administer the medicine to the babies with the horsetail shoots. So I think I'm just about at the end. Whoa! So I'm just about at the end. I think this is the paper birch. Oh, We have, now everything's flying. We talked about the bitterroot, sunflower. This is the spring beauty, which is the wild potato. This is the Saskatoon berries. We have the pushum, which we talked about. Now, the last thing that I wanted to say is I have to really acknowledge the people that have helped me with my learning, and it's a lifelong learning. I have learned from mentors from the Adams Lake, Corona Bowie. I've learned from mentor June Kelly, Reese from Nisconlith. I was very fortunate to sit on Crystal Morris, Thomas Morris, one of her workshops as well, just recently at a Secwepemc gathering. And so I have a lot of mentors that I go to and I listen to, plus I do my own research as well, and I've learned a lot. So I'm really fortunate that I've learned everything that I've learned, and I can go out and do walks and talk about the plants, the trees, the plants, the pond life, the roots, the berries, all those things. I can walk around now, and when I look at things, I recognize what they are and what they're good for. And also, I have a book that I have read about. I've read the ethnobotany of the Okanagan Colville people of British Columbia and Washington. And in that book, it's written by Randy Burchard, Nancy Turner, and Dorothy, I don't remember her last name, Kennedy. And in that book, it's a book that's really old, and it had a lot of the elders from the Colville and the Okanagan nations. And in that book has my great grandfather Joe Abel and my grandmother Mary Abel. So I was really fortunate that even years later as an adult, and my grandmother and my great grandfather are both gone, I'm still learning from their knowledge through books. And so we're really fortunate that we have the people that we have in our lives. I love being able to talk about the plants. I tell people, don't go out on the land unless you're with an elder or someone that knows about the plants, because there are poisonous plants that are out there as well. The death camas, and there's also the water hemlock that are poisonous. And so you have to really be careful when you're out there and learn, because I am still learning. And even though I've been doing this for many years, I'm still learning, and I'm still learning something just about every day. So I'd like to say, Cooksachuam, thank you for allowing me to talk about these plants. One last thing, this here is made by Jody, again, a friend of mine from Little Shuswap, and her partner, they gifted this to me because they know I work in the schools. This is made out of tule. So the tule plant, this was used as the summer lodge. It's very light. You harvest these while they're green or in the late fall before they dry up. And when it's hot out, it lets a little bit of air through. If it's raining, there's cells inside that swell, and so it closes it off, so it helps shelter the people on the inside so it doesn't rain. So they would overlap it. They would layer it down at the bottom to begin with, put another layer, and go up. And these would be the summer lodging for the summertime. So I'd like to say, Cooksachuam, thank you. I hope you enjoyed the video and you learned a little bit as well. I find that you never look at a plant the same way when you learn something new. Cooksachuam.